She's a developmental psychologist. But she also says that these ethics of care are really the foundations of democracy. They're not gender specific. It's about caring for one another, being relational, feeling connected to each other, knowing that our livelihood depends on other people. It just so happens that in our modern world, those might have become feminine values. I was talking to somebody earlier today about the fact that when I was in the 1980s, I think there were 2 women in the U.S. Senate, and today there are 20. I was talking to Robin about this. And how might we solve problems differently if more women were in Congress? Yeehaw! So if anybody's looking for their next line of work, you might want to think about public office. Okay, so we're going to talk. A connected community relies upon a social infrastructure. It's intentional. It's not an accident. Because we don't have bricks and mortar. We don't have the structures that you might think of. But in a community, it's what I call the bones. What holds this whole thing up, and how to, or as Irving Goffman called it, the door jamb. What's the thing that holds all this up? So what I was talking about earlier, and we can talk in more, stop me anytime you want me to, you want to say something. But this was basically what I did when I taught a training workshop back in the 1990s. The first session we spent on common needs. What is it that you're needing in your life right now that you don't have? Or what are you hoping to gain from belonging to this club? And that constitutes the why. And the why is the purpose, right? And to keep returning to the purpose is that you've heard of purpose-driven organizations. This is certainly one of them. We can't lose sight of why we're here. Then the next session we got together and we talked about the goals. And the goals were pretty well laid out in my handbook. They were play groups and member meetings for moms in the evening with speakers and a newsletter and something called In a Pinch. Do you all have In a Pinch? A lot of you do. That just warms my heart. I can remember when Laura McDonald and I were starting the first club in Upper Township, Ocean City, and we were sitting around her kitchen table talking about this notion. And I said, well, in Huntington Beach, we used to bring meals to each other after somebody had a baby or if they were sick or something like that. And Laura said, why don't we call it In a Pinch? And so that the name has stuck is really kind of heartwarming for me. And I also just want to add that when Claire was born in 1984, I received 4 tuna noodle casseroles. And they all had their unique spin. One had peas, one had almonds, I don't remember, It was very, very sweet though, and I laughed about it for years. But I loved those tuna noodle casseroles. All right, so then that's the what, the common goals of the what. And then the common process. Agreements for being together and for operating an organization. This is the one that's the most challenging, the one that requires the most attention and diligence. It's the one we can most easily lose track of. How are we doing? How do we communicate with each other? How do we make decisions? How do we transition board members? What are our expectations of each other? And we're going to talk about this in greater depth in a little bit. But I guess it suffices to say at this point that the how is the one that will give you the most headaches and the one that requires the most attention. Okay, social infrastructure continuing here. So, it stands to reason that if relationships are at the core of any community, that therefore it requires that we show up in person to actually forge them. It's an investment of time and presence. I know that everybody's busy. I was talking to some moms from a club earlier this morning, and I think I mentioned this, they have thousands of members in their club and they get 10 or 15 people to come to an event. Why is that? And you're shaking your head, so you're all having this experience. So, well, we'll talk about that. I think that face-to-face time with others can occur in playgroups. How many of you have playgroups going on in your clubs right now? Oh, good. Okay, good. And regular meetings at night without the kids. Oh, good, 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 good. So you have, and social gatherings like parties and outings and stuff. Okay, good. You know, there's some really simple things that we can do to stimulate this kind of interaction. I will say, though, as an answer to somebody's question earlier, what's it require? It requires some risk. It's going to require putting yourselves out there in a different way. You know, this storytelling thing, we used to do this. Whenever I would teach a workshop in the process session, the third session, I would bring in this very high technology props. I had paper lunch bags. And I had on inside of there, I had questions printed out and torn, you know, and folded up and put in the bag. And I'd go up to a group and I'd hand them a brown bag. And I'd say, okay, you're going to pass it around. Everybody's going to pull one out and they're going to tell a story. And everybody's going to pay attention. And there was always laughter. There was sometimes tears. There was sometimes boredom. But the notion was that if we just create this very simple technology for people to be curious about each other, you know, tell me, who inspires you? You know, is there a leader in your life that you admire? Or not, maybe not a leader, just who's somebody that you admire? Why did you leave home? That's a great story. And, or tell the story of leaving home. That's really fun. Talk about a past love that you didn't marry or you're not with. So there's all kinds of ways for you to get to know me. And in the telling of those stories, you're going to learn a lot about my values and about what I believe in and about my courage and about all these different things, right? If you're interested in storytelling as a community building tool, Google it. You'll find a ton of stuff. But there's one website in particular, and it is, hold on, yeah, orton.org, orton.org. And there's this great white paper that you can read that was really terrific in how they're using it in community-wide initiatives, you know, all ages, multi-generational, and around civic engagement. The same thing could just be so true of a parents' club. Okay? So in 2015, social infrastructure includes social media. That was the last thing that was on that previous slide. And I know that this is a hot topic. And so again, jump in anytime you want or stop me. But how can technology support community building but not replace it? So if I come to a mother's club, if I come to a parents' club thinking that I'm going to create relationships, and what I find is a lot of chatting online and a lot of stuff that doesn't engage me, I'm going to naturally feel disappointed. And then, you know, I may or may not stick around, but I'm a disengaged member. So when you say, we need people to volunteer to do X, Y, and Z, well, I'm disengaged. So why am I going to do that? So we have to find ways to get people engaged. And I would suggest, you know, this is going to, again, it's going to require some risk. And it might be that as a leader of your club, you're going to go back and you're going to say, you know, we're going to try something a little different. You know, at our next general meeting, we're going to do this brown bag question thing. Or we're going to do the fancy cards like this thing, you know, or whatever it is. And you're going to frame it as, we know that people are really looking for a relationship and we want to help make that happen. Connected communities, it's really important that you connect your action with your purpose. So I have found that true throughout my work life. I'm sure a lot of you would agree with me that if you tell your staff to do something, if they don't know why they're doing it, It's crazy. They're not going to do it. So it's really important to frame it. So this is our purpose, this is our goal. We really want to, get people engaged with each other. So this is one of the ways that we're going to try doing it. So play along with us. And if people hate it, well then you don't do it again. But I bet they're going to love it. Because like Will Rogers said, stories have a way of revealing what's in our heart. And that's what a lot of us are looking for. How do you do that? Okay, now the next slide. So, leadership is a key element of any social infrastructure. The leaders are the stewards of the bones. There's a takeaway sentence for you. The leaders are the stewards of the bones. That could be a t-shirt. So they're paying attention to the why, the what, and the how. I would suggest that what all leaders have in common, that they're purposeful and they're passionate. They really love what they're doing, and you feel that. That's inspiring. Leaders have a desire to be influential and impactful. Own up to it. Because I think a lot of us, I don't know about you, when I was a younger woman, I had difficulty admitting that I wanted to influence other people. I wanted to be impactful in the world. I wanted the world to know that I had been here. I thought, well, I'm not supposed to do that, I'm supposed to be a good girl and all that jazz. I grew up in a different era. But, so kind of owning that has been significant for me. Leaders want to make a contribution to the future. This is all about legacy. This is all about, and this is something that Eric Erickson talked about and Carol Gilligan talked about. That's what he means by generativity. What am I creating that's going to make a difference to the world and that's going to outlive me? Yeah. I couldn't have imagined that all of you would be gathered in a room in 2015 and I would be talking to you about the mothers clubs that I started. That's just incomprehensible. Actually, that's comprehensible because it's happening. Okay. It's just really far-fetched, I tell you. So anyway, it's important. And that leaders are committed to learning from their own experience. This great book that we're going to raffle off, The Crucibles of Leadership, that I mentioned when I was in grad school, I love this book because he talked about how, as I said earlier, leadership is revealed to us through our own experiences. It's not something that I go out there and I necessarily learn from some guru, but it's what I experience and my ability to reflect on my own experience and then capture it is a really powerful thing. To concretize it, to put into words what I'm experiencing. He talks about in this book your own personal leadership strategy. I think that's very cool. He's thinking, and he'll take you all through it. It's wonderful. And then the other thing I would say about leadership is that effective leaders inspire. They move people. So this is a capacity of the heart, not necessarily the head. And to inspire people, I would suggest we need to be able to take a risk. We need to be willing to do something that others might not have done before us. And I also find very inspiring when people talk about their own experience, when they use I statements, not necessarily we statements. They don't theorize and talk to me about some concept, but they talk to me about what they experience themselves. That's very human, and people will relate to that. Okay. The next slide. I'm doing all the talking.
We're listening avidly and hanging on for every word.
Uh-oh. Oh, yes.
Just something that's been going through my mind about leadership is that I think many of us probably think that, or I don't know, I shouldn't assume, but I think some people tend to think that leadership can only be, not can only be, but like if you have a certain position or title, let's say you're serving on the board. But I think a lot of leaders are not necessarily in this position. So if people don't feel like they can take on the commitment, like a certain time commitment that's associated with a certain position, for example, with the board, then I think it's important for us to get the message out. You can be a leader in other ways. So I just wondered if you could speak about that.
Did you all hear what she said? That a lot of people associate leadership with position. So we assume that if you're the president of something, or you're the vice president, or you're the chair of something, that you necessarily have leadership, and that the rest of us don't qualify somehow. That's a really wonderful point. And there's a lot of thoughts that come into my mind. And the first thought that pops into my mind is the difference between positional leadership like that and authority. I think some of us embody authority. Like, you're listening to me, and and it's probably because you think I have something to say. It's because I think I embody authority, and I am confident in what I'm saying. I don't necessarily have any designated position at all. It's the way that I behave, and it's the way I think about myself. And I think that a lot of times we confuse leadership with power. And we think that, okay, well, if I have that position at work, or if I have that position in the club, I'm going to be imbued with some power that's going to enable me to do something. And I think many of you could give examples of ineffective people in those positions. So that's why this exploration of what true leadership is so helpful and so valuable to reflect on, as he talks about in his book. These crucibles, these times in your life, you've all been through them. These times in your life that have really tested you. Becoming a mother, hello. You're the leader in your family, one of them. And so those crucible experiences that test us and have us reflect on ourselves is what enables us to really own the talent or own the skill. It's not positional. Yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what you're saying, that when we were starting this conference, there were a lot of people who were like, I don't know if I'm a leader. And, do I qualify to come? And I think that, when we're looking at the structure of parent clubs as peer-run volunteer organizations, that we need to expand our definition of leadership and see it as a continuum. That there are people that will become leaders through the experiences that the club has to offer by raising their hand to organize a plating. Like that is the first step of potentially, many. And that, I think that there is this hang up in terms of the definition of leadership, which can feel exclusive and limiting. But, when we see the potential of harnessing the whole membership as all potential leaders and future leaders in small and large ways, that is when you are really bringing to bear the connected community potential.
Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know for our club, where we're getting leadership members into our steering committee, we tend not to get the members who've been in the club for a while. If we don't seem to get them onto the steering committee within that first year and a half they've joined the club, we don't get them at all on the steering committee. And I don't know if that's common amongst everybody else. Like, either they're joining the club and they're gung ho and they're going to help everywhere they can, or they're just going to join and, and it's interesting because it's like you're trying to get all this energy, and you have these people who've been in the club and seen all these things and know what can be done, but you can't get their energy to come back into helping the club. And I'm just curious if other people have that same experience with their steering committee, if you kind of have that magic window of getting them the first year or two.
Well, it's interesting because we all develop differently. And so I wonder if, in fact, if there's more of a malaise, if there's just more of a general attempt at inspiring people all along the way, not to think that it's just in the beginning. You don't have to capture them just then. Because for a lot of us, it's just not the way it goes. As Amaran said, sometimes it's just an initial step. I'm just going to coordinate a playgroup. I'm just going to be the playgroup coordinator for 6 months, and that's the leadership I got right now. And then I'm going to find out that I like that. I'm going to try something more. Yeah. Well, so the other thing, we're going to keep moving because I know we're going to run out of time. just, clearly, each generation of leaders is unique. The founding leaders that started your clubs reflected the organization at that time, but today you have different developmental needs of your organization. And I would like to ask you to share some of those. I've kind of taken a stab at them, but there might be things that are true for you that I didn't capture up here. So definitely this sustaining face-to-face relationship building is a challenge, and it's a developmental need. A commitment to relationship, and relationship being the #1 quality indicator of how you're doing. Being able to evaluate the how consistently. You know how in business, I don't know how many of you have ever done a SWOT analysis, but you do strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Well, in our case, we don't really care so much about the opportunities and threats, but if we're just able to look at our strengths and weaknesses, this is what we're doing well and this is what we're not doing so well, and let's be honest about it, because it's the only way we're going to improve. And when you look at your weaknesses, these are the things we're not doing so well, those are your opportunities. That's how that works. Oh, look, we're not doing this so well, why don't we try something different? And you're challenged with how to integrate technology in what you do, not let it take over, but how to integrate it, how to use it in a meaningful way. And you're managing incredibly large memberships. I didn't have to do that. The largest club that I managed was 150 people or something, but you've got thousands, and that's just a whole different ballgame. Yes?
So I think in general the life cycle of